When we talk about changing everything in your life, it doesn't begin with a strategy or a plan or some complicated system you have to master. It starts with one moment, one decision. A moment where you stop negotiating with your old story and finally choose the version of yourself you know you're meant to be. That moment is powerful because it's the moment you reclaim authorship of your life. And for most people, that moment never comes. Not because they're incapable, but because they keep waiting for the perfect time, the perfect sign, the perfect circumstance. They wait for clarity, for confidence, for permission. But life doesn't reward waiting. Life rewards decisiveness. Life shifts the second you shift. You can look back at the most defining turns in your life and realize they didn't happen gradually. They happened in an instant. Maybe it was the moment you said, "I'm done living small." Maybe it was the moment you said, "I won't tolerate this pain anymore." Or the moment you whispered to yourself, "There's more for me than this." That was the beginning. That was the spark. Change doesn't take time. What takes time is convincing yourself that you deserve the life that opens up after the decision. But the decision itself, it's immediate. It's the moment you interrupt your patterns and reclaim your power. There's something extraordinary that happens when a person decides with absolute certainty. Not a hope, not a wish, not a maybe someday. A true, grounded, unshakable decision. That decision becomes a command to your mind, your body, your emotions. It reorganizes your focus. It rearranges your behavior. It shifts your standards. The world responds to a person who is certain. You walk differently. You speak differently. There is a presence in you that doesn't need to prove anything. Certainty isn't arrogance. It's alignment. It's the quiet knowing that your life is no longer being run by fear, hesitation, or stories that belong to an older version of you. When you decide, really decide, you're not just declaring a change, you're birthing a new identity. And identity is the most powerful force in human behavior. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you'll find a way to struggle. You'll find a way to struggle. If you see yourself as someone who always falls short, you'll sabotage at the finish line. But the instant you decide, "I'm the kind of person who follows through," your actions will rise to that identity. You won't need motivation. You won't need someone to push you. You simply act because that's who you are now. Most people think they're held back by circumstances, but they're really held back by indecision. They're drained not because they're doing too much, but because they're stuck in limbo, half committed, half uncertain, half hoping things will change on their own. Nothing is more exhausting than being undecided. The moment you decide, you liberate yourself. It's like taking a deep breath after holding it for years. Suddenly there's space, there's clarity, there's energy. You stop asking, "How long will this take?" and start asking, "How far can I go?" The decision frees you from the prison of hesitation. It opens the door to momentum. And momentum is everything. You felt it before, that feeling when something clicks and you suddenly move with a force greater than your doubts. That's the reward of a solid decision. Because once the decision is made, the path becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You stop giving energy to the things that don't align. You stop entertaining the habits that drain you. You stop feeding the emotions that once controlled you. A person who has made a real decision becomes unavailable to their old patterns. It's like trying to use a key that no longer fits the lock. The door to the old life has been sealed. The truth is, your life does not change when you learn more. Your life changes when you decide differently. You could read 1,000 books, listen to 1,000 speeches, gather all the advice in the world. But until you reach that point where you say, "Enough," nothing truly shifts. And the beauty of this moment is that it doesn't require perfect circumstances. It doesn't require confidence. It doesn't require having everything figured out. It only requires truth. A moment of honesty with yourself so pure, so raw, that it cuts through the noise of fear and reveals what you're really capable of. Sometimes the decision is born from pain, sometimes from inspiration, sometimes from exhaustion. But in every case, it's born from a recognition that the life you desire cannot coexist with the habits, beliefs, or compromises of the life you're leaving behind. You must choose. And when you must choose completely, not with one foot in and one foot out, and one foot out. Not with a safety net, not with a backdoor exit. You choose the new direction with the fullness of your being. Imagine waking up tomorrow and acting as if the decision you make today is final. Imagine speaking with the conviction of someone who knows exactly where they're going. Imagine behaving in a way that leaves no room for your old excuses. Imagine showing up with the energy of a person who refuses to settle for anything less than their highest standard. That energy alone could transform your relationships, your work, your health, your mindset. Because the world responds to a person who has decided. People feel it. Opportunities gravitate to it. Doors open for it. Life bows to the person who stands in certainty. But this moment doesn't happen on its own. You create it with courage, with honesty, with the willingness to let go of what no longer belongs in your next chapter. You don't need perfect clarity. You need commitment. You don't need to know the entire path. You need the first step. You don't need all the answers. You need the decision that you will find them on the way. This is the moment where everything changes. This is the moment that separates the life you've lived from the life you're about to create. And it begins the second you say the words that only you can say, this is who I am now, and this is where my life turns. When you look at your life, the results you have, the relationships you experience, the energy you wake up with each morning, so much of it comes down to one invisible force, the standards you've chosen to live by. Not the ones you talk about, not the ones you wish you had. The ones you actually tolerate, the ones you allow, the ones you reinforce through your actions every single day. And what most people don't realize is that their standards were never consciously chosen. They were inherited, absorbed, shaped by environment, by childhood, by fear, by comfort. But when you finally take ownership of those standards, when you raise them, strengthen them, and refuse to settle below them, everything in your life begins to shift. You don't get what you want. You get what you're willing to demand from yourself. The moment you lift your standards, your behavior follows. It's almost automatic. Think about a time in your life when you felt like something was no longer acceptable. Maybe it was the way someone treated you. Maybe it was your health. Maybe it was your health. Maybe it was your level of effort. The second you said, I'm done living like this, everything inside you reorganized. You stopped trying to negotiate with your excuses. You stopped entertaining the habits that didn't reflect who you wanted to be. You acted. You acted. You elevated. That wasn't motivation. That was standards. Standards are the internal boundaries that shape your destiny. They determine what you allow and what you reject. They decide what gets your energy and what doesn't. They're like an internal thermostat. No matter what happens, your life returns to the level you've set for yourself. If your standard is survival, you'll survive. If your standard is mediocrity, you'll hover there. But if your standard becomes excellence, if it becomes growth, contribution, presence, strength, your life will rise to meet it. And if it doesn't rise immediately, you do. You adjust, you stretch, you evolve. Standards pull you upward, yet most people live by standards they never consciously approved. They tell themselves they should be better, should be healthier, should be more disciplined, more successful, more focused, but a should has no power. Should have feels like a wish, something nice to have. Nothing changes when something is should change. Change happens when something must change. That's the difference between wanting and requiring. That's the difference between a preference and a standard. When you shift a should into a must, you ignite a force inside you that doesn't depend on willpower. It becomes part of who you are. It's not the big victories that define you. It's not the big victories that define you. It's the standards you uphold in the smallest moments, when no one is watching, when it's inconvenient, when it's easier to break your word to yourself. Because standards are built in the invisible moments, in how you start your day, in how you start your day, in how you speak to yourself, in how you respond to setbacks, in whether you choose what's comfortable or what's honest, in whether you repeat the patterns that keep you stuck or commit to the ones that pull you forward. Those tiny moments accumulate and become your identity. And once your identity shifts, your entire life shifts with it. You cannot hold high standards and live a low-energy life. You cannot hold high standards and surround yourself with people who drain you. You cannot hold high standards and indulge the old explanations for why you can't, why you're tired, why you're scared, why you'll start tomorrow. The moment you raise your standards, you instantly expose the habits that contradict them. And yes, it can feel uncomfortable. Growth always creates friction with the old version of you. But that tension is proof that something powerful is happening. You're evolving out of your previous limits. When you raise your standards, something else happens. Your environment begins to shift. People treat you differently, not because they changed, but because you changed the energy you accept. You'll stop seeking approval and start commanding respect. You'll stop compromising and start leading. You'll stop trying to fit in and start building a life that fits you. Every relationship becomes clearer. Every opportunity becomes more aligned. Because when your standards rise, your frequency rises, and life always matches your frequency. But raising your standards doesn't mean becoming rigid or harsh. It means valuing yourself enough to demand alignment. It means refusing to shrink, refusing to tolerate patterns that keep you small, refusing to let your potential gather dust. It means honoring the part of you that knows there is more, that feels it, that hears it whispering, pushing, calling. Raising your standards isn't about becoming someone else. It's about returning to the strength, the truth, the capacity that was always there, but maybe got buried under fear or noise or survival. Some people think high standards create pressure, but the real pressure comes from living below your potential. That's where the exhaustion is. That's where the self-doubt festers. That's where frustration builds. When you raise your standards, you actually free yourself. You remove the weight of inconsistency. You remove the tug of war inside your mind. You remove the emotional cost of pretending you're okay with things you're not okay with. High standards aren't a burden. They're liberation. And here's the deeper truth. When you raise your standards, you elevate not just your results, but your state of being. You start showing up with more intention, more clarity, more strength, more self-respect. People feel that. You feel that. You feel, and that internal shift begins influencing every part of your life. Your standards become a signal to the world. This is who I am now. This is the level I operate at. This is the life I'm committed to creating. The beautiful part is you don't need to raise every standard all at once. You pick one. You pick the one that has been calling you the loudest. Maybe it's your energy. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your discipline. Maybe it's your self-talk. Maybe it's the way you show up for your dreams. Start there, and once you raise one standard, others will naturally follow. Because when you elevate one part of your identity, it becomes harder to tolerate anything that contradicts that new version of you. This is the shift that changes everything. This is the moment where your life stops being accidental and starts being intentional. Where you stop drifting and begin designing. Where you stop repeating and begin rising. It begins the moment you decide that your old standards no longer belong in your new life. So many people try to change their lives by changing what they know. But the truth is, information has never been the problem. People know what to do. They know they should be healthier, more focused, more disciplined, more loving, more committed, more intentional. The gap isn't knowledge. The gap is emotion, because emotion is the invisible force that drives every action you take, every decision you make, every pattern you repeat, and every limit you unconsciously hold on to. If you don't shift your emotional state, you can't shift your behavior. And if you can't shift your behavior, you can't shift your life. It's that simple. Think about a moment in your life when you felt unstoppable. It wasn't because someone gave you a new piece of information you had never heard before. It was because something inside you got activated. Your energy changed, your focus sharpened, your certainty rose, your fear didn't disappear, you just stopped letting it lead. That emotional state powered you forward in a way that logic alone never could. In that moment, you understood something most people never learn. Your emotional state is the steering wheel of your destiny. Every day, without realizing it, people wake up and accept whatever emotional state shows up first. They open their eyes and wait to feel like being productive, wait to feel like being confident, wait to feel like taking action. And because they wait, they lose. Because they allow emotions to dictate their behavior instead of mastering their emotions so they can dictate their direction. It's like handing the keys of your life to whatever feeling happens to show up in the morning. And most of the time, those feelings are shaped by habit, by old stories, by stress, by the past, not by possibility. But what happens the moment you decide you will no longer let your emotional default run your life? Something extraordinary. You begin influencing your internal world instead of reacting to it. You start creating emotions on command, emotions that empower you rather than drain you. That's the turning point. Because when you learn to shift your state, you're no longer at the mercy of circumstances. You don't need your environment to be perfect. You don't need every detail to go your way. You don't need external motivation. You generate your own power. Emotion is not random. It is conditioned. It's a pattern. It's built through repetition. through what you focus on, how you use your body, how you breathe, what you say to yourself, and what you choose to believe in the moment. If you change these ingredients, you change the emotion. And if you change the emotion, you change the behavior. That's why two people can face the same challenge, but respond completely differently. One shuts down, the other rises. One sees a wall, the other sees a doorway. The difference isn't the challenge, it's the emotional state. Think about how your body shifts when you're angry or inspired or grateful or stressed. You breathe differently. You stand differently. You think differently. Your internal dialogue changes. Emotion shapes physiology, and physiology feeds emotion. It's a loop. Break the loop, and you break the pattern. Strengthen the loop, and you strengthen the pattern. If you learn to use your body, your breath, your focus, and your meaning, you can create any emotional state you need at any moment. Imagine someone who wants to change their life but keeps saying, I just don't feel motivated. Motivation isn't a gift, it's a state, and states can be created. Someone who says they're overwhelmed is often focusing on everything at once instead of the next step. Someone who feels stuck is usually telling themselves a story that keeps them frozen. Someone who feels defeated is often breathing, moving, and thinking in a way that reinforces defeat. Shift the emotion, and the same person becomes unstoppable. But most people don't know they have that power. They think emotions are something they have, not something they choose and create. The moment you realize you can generate your emotional state intentionally, you stop living small. You stop postponing your dreams. You stop letting fear dictate the direction of your life. You start leading your life from a place of strength instead of weakness. You start acting based on your vision instead of your mood. You start anchoring yourself in possibility instead of past limitations. And the beautiful part is, the more you practice shifting your state, the faster you can do it. What once took hours can take minutes. What once took minutes can take seconds. You become emotionally agile, capable of moving your internal world with precision and purpose. And when you live in an empowered state consistently, your decisions change. When your decisions change, your habits change. When your habits change, your destiny changes. That is the chain reaction emotion creates. It affects everything from your relationships to your opportunities to your health, your creativity, your resilience. Emotion is not just a feeling, it's a strategy. It's the tool you use to access your best self on demand. Some people carry emotions from years ago into the present moment and wonder why they can't create a different future. They're living in states built from old wounds, old conversations, old disappointments, and because they repeat the state, they repeat the story. They repeat the story. And because they repeat the story, they repeat the life. But the moment you interrupt that pattern, not someday, not gradually, but in a single breath, a single movement, a single decision, you reclaim your power. You stop being defined by what hurt you. You stop being shaped by what limited you. You become the one shaping the emotion instead of the one being shaped by it. This is where real transformation begins. Not in knowledge, not in intention, but in mastering the emotional force that drives your behavior. If you can command your state, you can command your life. And the moment you learn to do that, everything becomes possible. You become someone who moves with energy even when you're tired, someone who shows up with certainty even when you're unsure, someone who acts with courage even when fear whispers in your ear. That's the version of you that changes the world you live in. Emotion is the power behind your choices, your discipline, your presence, your relationships, your success, and your identity. When you understand it, honor it, and intentionally shape it, you step into a level of life most people never experience. Because when you master your emotions, you master your future. There comes a point where clarity isn't enough. Intention isn't enough. Desire isn't enough. You need movement. You need action. Not small, hesitant, half-committed action, but action that reflects a decision. Action that matches the standards you've claimed. Action that carries the emotional force of someone who refuses to live the same year over and over again. Because the truth is, action is the bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. It is the proof of your decision, the expression of your identity. Without action, dreams remain fantasies. With action, even the impossible begins to bend. Most people don't struggle because they're incapable. They struggle because they hesitate. They overthink, they wait, they question themselves into paralysis. They want certainty before they move, but certainty is not something you receive. It's something you receive. It's something you create through motion. The moment you take consistent steps, Even if they're imperfect, momentum begins to build. And momentum is a force more powerful than motivation, more reliable than inspiration, more enduring than excitement. Motivation fades, but momentum carries you. Momentum doesn't start big. It starts with a single step that you commit to repeating. It's the willingness to show up even when you don't feel like it, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed, even when the old patterns try to pull you back into comfort. It's understanding that every great transformation in history, personal or global, was born from an action that looked small at the time but created a ripple too strong to stop. When you take massive action, you're not just changing your behavior, you're stepping into a different timeline. But let's be honest, massive action isn't always glamorous. In fact, it's rarely glamorous. It's waking up early when your mind tries to negotiate sleep. It's choosing discipline over comfort, truth over excuses, progress over perfection. It's doing the thing you've avoided even though the avoidance has cost you more than the effort ever will. It's running toward the challenge instead of waiting for a moment when you will feel ready. Most people think readiness comes before action, but readiness is created by action. Your confidence doesn't grow from thinking about it. It grows from doing it. There's a moment when massive action flips from something you force to something you embody. You stop seeing it as effort and start seeing it as identity. You no longer ask, "How will I?" You simply say, "This is what I do." And that shift is everything, because when massive action becomes part of your nature, the results in your life begin to accelerate. Opportunities open because action signals commitment. People trust you because action reveals integrity. Your own mind trusts you because action proves you follow through. Every step you take builds a stronger relationship with yourself, and that's the foundation of an extraordinary life, self-trust built through consistent action. Massive action doesn't mean chaos or doing everything at once. It means doing what matters with full presence, full energy, and full ownership. It's intentional. It's aligned. It's strategic. It's not about being busy. It's about being purposeful. It's about identifying the few actions that will move the needle and pouring your strength into them with intensity and consistency. When you operate this way, you become unstoppable, not because things suddenly get easy, but because you stop giving your power to resistance. Action also exposes what's working and what isn't. You can't refine a path you're not walking. You can't adjust a strategy you never implement. Most people sit on the sidelines waiting to figure it out, but clarity is often hidden inside the doing. The feedback, the lessons, the insights, they only reveal themselves once you're in motion. And the beautiful part of action is that it doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. Imperfect action, repeated consistently, will outperform perfect ideas that never leave your mind every single time. When you commit to massive action, something profound happens. Your world expands. You start to notice possibilities you were blind to before. You start to feel stronger than the fears that once controlled you. You start to access a deeper part of yourself, a part driven by purpose, not hesitation, a part that knows you were meant for evolution, not repetition. And the more you act from this place, the more your life reflects it. Your results shift, your relationship shift, your mindset shifts. You begin to live in congruence with who you've always had the potential to become. And let's not ignore the truth that massive action also interrupts the old identity. The version of you that survived on doubt or waited for perfect timing or convinced yourself you weren't ready. Massive action leaves no space for that version to lead anymore. It crowds out the excuses. It silences the limitations. It replaces hesitation with progress. It transforms the internal narrative from I hope to I am. The old identity can't coexist with a level of action that contradicts its limits. So it dissolves, and that dissolution is what growth feels like. There will be days when action feels heavy, days when nothing seems to move, days when you question the pace of your progress. That's normal, but massive action isn't about always feeling strong. It's about always feeling strong. It's about always moving forward, even on the hard days, even when the path seems uncertain, even when doubt whispers, because action is the antidote to doubt. Movement is the antidote to fear. Progress is the antidote to stagnation. And each time you push through resistance, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was once held hostage by hesitation. And here's the most empowering part. Once you build momentum, life begins to support you. You start meeting the right people, attracting the right opportunities, discovering the right insights. Not because luck suddenly appears, but because action positions you where luck can actually find you. People will look at your results and call them overnight success, but you'll know the truth. It was built through days, weeks, months of massive, deliberate, aligned action. This is the key that changes everything. The decision sets the direction. The standards hold the structure. The emotional mastery fuels the drive, but it is massive action that transforms potential into reality, intention into impact, and identity into destiny. When you commit to acting boldly, consistently, and unapologetically toward the life you want, you become a force that nothing can contain.